we had effectively qualifying engines being done. And if you have a look at the engine that might have been in Murph's thing for the Lap of the Gods, that might have been a pretty good engine.
Hey Sleuthers, we're back. It's Noonz. This is the kickoff of a new series of the V8 Sleuth Podcast, powered by Parramatta Toyota, Sydney's Toyota dealer with a passion for performance and motorsport. Now, Mark Skaife, he is no stranger to our pod. He's back with a double-part ep to fire up our 2026 series. And in this first part, we hit on heaps of interesting topics, some current stuff and some old stuff, a potential Supercars event on the Central Coast, his departure from Supercars TV, and rewinding to the Laser Series days, Peter Williamson's Supra, big Darrell Eastlake, huge. Speaking of huge, that Eastern Creek crash from the Triple Challenge in 95 in depth. We talk about his first car race in a Tirana that came via Mark Winterbottom's dad, special HRT qualifying engines, and how it all went wrong at Bathurst in 2006. This is a juicy one. Let's dive in on the V8 Sleuth Podcast, powered by Parramatta Toyota. Hello, Skaife. How are you?
Hey, Noonz, very well, thank you.
Congratulations, you are now three-time guest on the pod.
Ah, perfect. Oh,
6-time, 5-time, 3-time.
Good work.
We've talked a lot in the past. When we caught up in 2019, we were sitting in the same office. We talked a lot of factory Holden stuff back then. It was 50 years of the Holden dealer team and factory Holden racing. We wouldn't have guessed in 2019 that we would sit here in, 6 or 7 years later. There ain't no Holden anymore. The world has changed a lot since we have sat in this office and talked about stuff.
Well, it is a weird landscape, isn't it? I mean, I think if we had asked ourselves at that stage, would General Motors retire the Holden brand? You'd say, no way.
No.
Would manufacturing in this country be so difficult? You would have said, no way.
Mm.
And you probably would have said, over the course of the journey, what does the Australian motorsport landscape look like? Was a Gen 3 initiative on the cards sort of at that point? Not really, because we'd just come out of the back of what was a successful car of the future. And there's always change, but probably didn't ever think that the level of change was going to be so extreme.
No, big odds. If anyone had called that, we would have looked at them and gone, yeah, whatever.
Mm.
Good on you. Some of the stuff that's been floating around of late, Supercars on the Central Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have done any track testing back in the day in your youth?
Yes, certainly was. Not that I can report, and I really don't want to talk about it too much, but yes.
You know some roads.
Yeah, definitely. The old Pacific Highway was and still is. A lot of the guys use it for, bike stuff, and my dad may have had the odd race on those roads.
Allegedly.
Yeah, so, it's obviously a great, part of my childhood growing up on the Central Coast. And it was, now it's like a suburb of Sydney, but it was just a beautiful, picturesque seaside area, but it also had beautiful valleys up to the national parks from Yarramalong and Duralong, and our tyre businesses did all the sort of the farm work for all those beautiful old blokes that had orange orchards and dairy farms and stuff. And we did all the work on all the earth movers for the contract between Sydney and Newcastle for the new freeway, which bypassed Wyong, because the Pacific Highway went actually straight past our tyre service originally. So a lot of history and great lineage with the Central Coast. And now when you think about us, toying with the idea via Central Coast Council and via Wollongong to replace Newcastle, for both of those areas, they're both beautiful vistas, gorgeous coastline. That part of Australia is pretty special. So it would be fantastic to be able to do it. We were very close with Gosford originally. So before Newcastle come on stream, James Warburton and I had basically done a deal with the Central Coast Council to have a race in Gosford. And the council went into administration. They merged the two councils with Gosford and Wyong, become Central Coast Council, and they went into administration. At that point, then the financials didn't work for them, so we shifted it to Newcastle. That was a fair while ago now, but obviously still good to have interest with them.
Now, without giving it away, if there is a race there or thereabouts, where's the gun place for us to go and stay? We want to book really early before anybody else gets a clue in as to where to go.
Oh, well, my favourite's the Terrigal Crown Plaza. You know, that's a beautiful area. Terrigal's just a gorgeous little spot. So that would be the highlight. That'd be one that you'd go and stay at tomorrow.
Mark that down. Mark that down.
Yeah, but anyway, where it actually gets located, we're looking at a few different zones, and clearly, like all things, Noonz, you're trying to do something that has minimal disruption to the locals, minimal disruption to the traffic flow. There's a lot of people, especially post-COVID, who basically go back into Sydney every day because, I mean, really the drive from or to the northern end of Sydney, to the North Shore, for instance, is probably 45 minutes to an hour, depending upon when you leave and what the traffic's like.
It's a bit like living not that far out of Melbourne to get into whichever edge of Melbourne you've kind of got to get into for those who are listening in Victoria. What's the realistic possibility of all of this? I mean, how many times over the years have we heard there could be a race here, there could be a track here, there could be a thing here, and those stories are abundant here, there, and everywhere. Is this a legitimate red-hot shot at some point?
Absolutely, 100%. Yep. And it's good to have a bit of an auction. You know, if you've got a couple of regions that are looking for this, then you know you tend to sharpen the pencil as a consequence. And
bit of competitive tension never hurt anybody.
It's always good. And you know, Destination New South Wales and the Min's government in New South Wales are keen to get another event going. And Newcastle, you know, 60% of the racetrack was on the water. It was just beautiful. So
it's great.
Tragic to lose that. I can't remember another time where local council outvoted the Premier and got away with it. But anyway, that's another story.
Where could this event, if it happened, where would it fit? I mean, where do you fit it on the calendar where there's some bits that are kind of already locked in because of existing deals or the weather in certain, you know, the dry season in Darwin, for example, is an important part of when and where the championship goes to Hidden Valley. But where could it fit?
I think it can probably fit in the first third of the series. And I think what we've got to do probably is, because we've got finals and the grand final build-up, I think we've probably got to energise, you know, Perth will energise the start of the year when that comes on stream. But we've got to energise the Sprint Cup, probably have some more things to play for within the Sprint Cup. And, you know, I see it as sort of the first third of the year being, you know, quite a pivotal part of locating it at the right spot and being able to do it the right way with the right weather conditions.
Yeah, the weather, big part. I mean, you got to have people wanting to go and having an environment for them to want to be around and want to be in. There's so much that's been said and everyone's got their views and everyone's got their suggestions. I've had a few over the time. How do we get that front half of the year? I mean, the back half of the year there's no problem with in the calendar. We've got all those big events, finals, Bathurst, Enduros, Gold Coast, Adelaide, no problem. It takes us so long over the year to build up, and maybe Central Coast can form part of that and the Perth Street Race can form part of that. What else can the sport do to get more regularity? I mean, you're a football follower. We're jealous of football, aren't we, no matter what the code, because they've got a weekly formula of they play, there's the preview, there's the review, there's the team ins and outs, there's the injuries, there's the tribunals, there's the coaching, there's something always going on. How can we have more things going on more often in supercars racing?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. And look, that's the cadence that you're talking about. They've got a real rhythm. You know,
totally.
The two preeminent sports in this country is the AFL and the NRL have got a great rhythm. That cyclic nature of what you just explained is a really, really strong part of what latches the customer to the sport each week. And there's a storyline each week. And we just don't have it. I mean, to be fair, we have tried, even way back from when we sold the business to Archer. Tony Cochran and I were talking about, at that point, we were talking about 18 events in 40 weeks. And we were trying to basically do this thing where it was almost every second week. Now, certain things make differences there, mostly governments, because governments determine they're our sanction fee or stakeholder engagement where you can't necessarily go against when they want to put it. So, for instance, Clipsal was the gun start to the year.
Yeah.
Right? It was unbelievable. And we've purposely done it pre-football codes and we finished post-football codes. So if you think about that as the two bookends, when the Premier in South Australia said, look, I want to change it from the first part of the year to the end, what we've done is in the end design a final series so it's not a dead rubber. So essentially we've been able to cater for a really big build up to the final part of the season. I take your point. I think the early part of the season needs to be really rejuvenated and refreshed. And
I start later. Could you start later at all?
Well, I just, again, I'm always loath thinking about starting it in the footy season. Straight away when you do the Grand Prix and the footy season, when they correlate together, it actually hurts both events. So, I think starting it earlier is still smart, but then having things to keep it energized is really important. And even as silly as, we've spoken a lot about why we're doing that Motor Racing 360 show as a weekly thing, because you're trying to deliver up motorsport, but principally supercar content each week. Stuff that you do all the time. Speed Cafe does the same thing. Everyone's trying to improve the cadence and improve the rhythm. Just so happens that you've only got 14 events and you've got to spread it across a big period.
And you've only got 24 drivers. You've got 11 teams, whatever it might be.
Yep.
You don't have 18 AFL clubs with 40-odd players on the list with coaches, assistant coaches, presidents, CEOs, AFL staff, broadcasters across every element of media. It's just a bigger beast. And that's why it's not just a case of there's not as much to talk about, but how far can you dig and how often can you go there and how often can you fill an hour of TV every week or a podcast every week or a website of content every week. It is a bit of a grind. It's not a case that everyone's asleep at the wheel, I don't think. Everyone's trying to do stuff, and there's more stuff now. I think back, 15 years maybe, how much content was actually around to watch if you're a car racing tragic or a Supercars fan. V8 Extra, we had that, remember, on 7?
Yep.
Half an hour show. Half an hour?
Yeah,
half an hour, I think it was.
Yeah.
Saturday lunchtime, Channel 7.
No one saw it.
Not much other stuff in between.
Yeah.
There's probably now more stuff, and that's where podcasts and online shows and YouTube and all that stuff's been great because it's actually opened up the platform for other people to do other things to help fill some of the gaps along the way, but there's still gaps, so it's a bit of an ongoing. You mentioned Motor Racing 360. Obviously, there's a change in your world in Tally this year. How have you found it? Have you found the reaction? What are you doing on your Supercars weekends? Because you're not at the track anymore.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. It's been, I've got to say, it's been quite difficult to adjust to because I've spent my whole life at the racetrack, right? And, the captain's call that James Warburton made, I made the comment earlier this year that he helped me with my golf handicap and my boxing regime, which was nice of him. And I suppose in a similar way, there's a bit of form there, given he did the same thing with Lee Matthews and Bruce Baccavani out of the AFL coverage. So, for Neil and I, it was quite difficult. Not just I think generational change is completely fine, and I think all of us would be big enough and measured enough and sophisticated enough to come up with a plan around however that was going to work if it was done the right way. And based on doing it the right way, you bring people along on the journey, and you seek to make the product better. So, when you lose someone like a Neil Crompton, for instance, I would argue that he's the best motorsport commentator in the world. So you lose someone like a Neil Crompton, you lose a massive amount of IP. And that part, I think, in terms of delivering the output for Supercars, hasn't gone as well as you would like it to go. And then part of what was going on in the off-season, because of how late it all was and the things that were going on in the background, the 360 show, I've been trying to get the 360 show going basically the whole time I've been with Fox. And finally we've been able to get it going. And there's just so much good stuff because motor racing, under that scenario, you cover all the things that Fox have got.
Yeah.
Other stuff.
Yeah.
So, I find my weekends now probably busier in some ways because I've got to watch, I've made sure I was sitting up to watch, well, I was obviously watching Monaco qualifying. It's one of the best things I've seen in a long time. And then, MotoGP I've always liked, but I probably haven't had time really to watch it properly. So there's so much of that I've really enjoyed. Obviously Van Gisbergen, in the States, I've been watching a lot of what's going on in NASCAR land too. So the culmination of all those things is actually, it's turned out to be quite good, and I'm enjoying it.
So really it was a case not so much of the what, it was just the how. In the how it all went down. And is it a case that you're just waiting for an answer? It seemed like everybody else is talking about it, but the person that's involved in the topic is the one who's kind of not involved in it. It always tends to feel that way, whether it's a driver who's leaving a team or it's a team principal who's leaving a team or it's someone leaving a television role. They're generally the last person to really be told about it. How does this all work in this sport? It's very weird.
Yeah, well, that is really strange. And that's really, again, that's probably the thing that Neil and I struggled with the most. It was just the level of communication and being able to sit down and, get an answer and do the things that we needed to do to plan out whatever the next step was. Again, those things are never really nice. They're difficult to adjust to, but they're also just difficult to accept that, when the output, and again, a lot of the keyboard warriors will, whack me for, supposedly being a Triple 8 fan or whatever.
You are. They said you are. You are.
Yeah.
You don't know this.
Well, you can only ever look at how people operate their businesses and look at how people operate their race teams. And if you weren't impressed with how Brock Feeney and that Triple 8 organisation operated last year, there's something wrong with you, right? So
that's pretty impressive.
So when you think about all that stuff, and then you look at what actually happens and what you want from it, the Bathurst race and the Bathurst call, Neil and I shook hands with each other at the end, and that's sort of as good as we can do. And if you got someone better and you can do it better, then best of British luck.
Did you approach that last round in Adelaide as if this is it, we're going to go out in style, we're going to have a good old go at this?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and he and I, we're great mates, and we take the piss out of ourselves, pretty regularly, and we like that. That's half the thing, the rapport. That's probably what I miss the most, to be honest. It's really the rapport, the rapport with Neil in the box, and then back into Larko in the lane. Three blokes that have lived their life loving car racing, and you like the personalities, you like the differing views, you like the way that you try to tell a story each weekend, and that narrative, is really important for the quality of the game.
Does Tony have to kick you out of the house on race weekends because she's sick of you watching and having every single form of motor racing on for a whole weekend?
Well, that's a bit like it's always been, but yeah, for different reasons. Yeah, but the girls. So my oldest daughter is at Trinity College in Melbourne, so she's going to uni, so she's out of the place. And then my youngest daughter's gone to Armidale and is doing psychology up at UNE.
So she's going to have you all figured.
So yeah, so at the moment, the house, Toad's listening to me, watching all these different sorts of motor racing, and the kids are bolted.
Go on. I would be scared. Could you imagine if you're a young bloke going to date one of your daughters, turning up to meet you for the first time? Has that happened yet?
Yes, it has, but there is a bit of the part that's important, Noonz, is they've got to know the rules.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a
good
little
boundary set.
There's a little bit of intimidation that's required when those things happen.
Angry Mark? Yeah. Have you had angry Mark?
I don't really need to. There's enough. I think there's enough of that the girls might tell them before they arrive.
Preloaded.
It's preloaded. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, let's go back in the files a bit. We've talked over a couple of episodes of this podcast about various stuff. The first time in 2019, we talked a lot of factory Holden. In 2020, it was COVID time, so I think we're on the phone. You just had a book out. We did a lot of chat about all sorts of bits and pieces. I actually was reminded the other day about something that Motorcraft are doing a bit of stuff with us in recent times in our business, and it takes me back to the Laser series, which was Motorcraft backed. And there's that vision of your car. I think we ran this on the Shannon's Legend series. You got poleaxed one day at Oran Park, straight up the backside. The thing's about a foot shorter. And instead of a tow truck coming out to collect it or people trying to move it off the track, they simply forklifted the thing up and off and loaded it off the track to the side. But am I right in saying that that wasn't the first laser that was prepped for racing that might have ended up not too good at the end of its life?
Yeah, well, it was a pretty interesting series because, it was a great initiative. Ford, Mike Breen, so the Goodyear Car Owners Club with Motorcraft and Ford. So you went down and you bought your Ford Laser, and it was about $3,000 off. They were $9,600. Then you bought a little kit which had the wheels and the shock absorbers and all the stuff. You went and put a roll cage in and a seat belt, and you were pretty much off and running.
And you could go run it yourself.
Pretty much. So Dad and I did that, no problem at all. And it was, an incredible series, for not just for how cost effective it was, but it had a lot of really good series production, but that's what the regulations were of the day. A lot of really good drivers, Mark Gibbs, Peter Dane, Ken Douglas, Stevie Williams, David Brabham.
That's right, yeah.
There was a lot of Jim Zerafos. There was a lot of really good drivers of the day, and I really enjoyed it. And that wasn't a day to enjoy because I was leading. I passed Peter Dane for the lead.
I love how you remember all this exactly bang on. So this is 1986?
Five, yeah. And that was the 86 season. So first year I was 85, and then in the 86 season I fired down the inside of Peter Dane at the last corner at Oran Park, got to the lead, and we made contact coming out of the corner, and he fired me in the fence, and then it bounced back out of the fence, and someone completely Liberace'd it. So that was the end of that was the end of that car. So the option then of the day, what do? Do you miss the last round or whatever? And we were still in contention to win it. So Dad and I and a really close friend of the old man's, we got a Ford body shell. We drove down to City Ford, grabbed a Ford white body shell, and I just basically tortured, ridiculous hours to put everything that was still okay in that previous car and then put fresh stuff in the new one. We were all sort of hands on deck, but basically just us. Then fired another new car out and won the next race meeting at Amaru Park. So it was just
instantly a valuable car.
Exactly.
But what happened to the very first laser, Mark?
The first laser may have been involved.
Allegedly, just have a little clear the throat moment there.
May have allegedly not made the races, and may have actually had a little incident on the road before I got there.
What sort of an incident was that?
Well, Mum sort of put it in a way that she said, "Well, that's the end of your laser series thing," and then Dad come home with another one from the local Ford dealer. They were just breeding. So the first one didn't look very flash. Actually, far from flash. It was.
Was it worse than the Oran Park one?
Not a lot different, because if you're going to say write off, when they're written off, they're written off. No, yeah.
It's sort of half pregnant. It's a write off or a write off.
Similar value. Anyway, no, over and out. So we did have a few misadventures, but they were wild races. I mean, I don't know whether you remember, but some of the races, they're huge incidents, and it was pretty vigorous, and I loved it. And I always remember one of my best moves. I got alongside Steve Williams. He had a Dayglow and white laser. He was leading, and for my sins, I decided to go down the outside of him at dead stop at Amaru Park, and I took basically the outside line from dead stop, then around Rod Hodson corner, then we went up the straight together, over the top of the hill together, around the outside of him at the loop, come down to Mazda House, to the fast right-hander down the back. Was still on the outside of him. He pushed me off into the grass. I come back out of the grass, fired down the inside of him, ran into him at Honda. That's the only left-hander. So then now I'm back on the inside, and I was able to just escort Stevie a little wide, and then and got to the lead.
Pretty much took a lap to get by.
Lap on the outside. Yeah.
Have you been shown the vision that's floated around? It gets a little. Some of the old vision from back in the day gets a new life on social media, and there's a bit of vision from the 9 Wide World of Sport Vault that I think they've rolled out a few times, and it's been shared by plenty. Maybe your kids have offered it up to you somewhere along the line. Of you and a very young Richard Mork having a disagreement one day at Amaru Park.
Yeah, I have. I can't take that back. Darrell Eastlake was one of Dad's best mates, so Darrell Eastlake had come down to Amaru Park to do a Wide World of Sport story.
At least young Tyro that's...
And we'd already done a go-karting one, so he was sort of following the career pathway, and it was a day where Richard Mork had come from about 4 or 5 car lengths back and speared me at dead stop at the slowest corner at Amaru, and I wasn't very happy. Neither was the old man. And for anyone that knows, when the old man steps off the bike, he does step off the bike pretty hard. So it was pretty ugly back in the pit area, and the stewards and all the things were involved. But I probably should have waited and taken a few breaths before I did the interview with Darrell. It wasn't good.
is great for us these
Yeah.
days. It's great for us. Hey, Darrell Eastlake, tell me some Darrell Eastlake stories, because I don't think we've really talked much about him on our pod. And I think he was criticised a lot because he wasn't a detail guy, but he wasn't there to add the detail. He was there to add all the hype and the big voice and the he did the weightlifting and the state of origin and all that stuff. He grabbed attention and made you listen and tuned you in. He was passionate. He was enthusiastic, but obviously he's no longer with us now. But have you got some Darrell stories? Because seriously, the guy was literally larger than life.
He was, and a tremendous man. Like for a big, tough looking, robust bloke. He had a beautiful, soft side to him. He was a tremendous man. He did a lot for me, and he was really, really great friends with Dad for many, many years. They had a lot of fun together, mostly with a few adult beverages on board. Originally he was the Central Coast sports announcer on 2GO, so the local Central Coast radio station, and he did rugby league. Rugby league was his game. He was actually a really high-level surf boat guy that had a real interest in sport. He loved car racing. He was a pretty ordinary driver. I remember teaching him how to drive at the Grand Prix in Adelaide, and he was horrible.
Didn't he race a Leyland P76 somewhere over the years? I reckon I've seen that somewhere.
I think he did.
Which, if he's racing one of them,
well, we used to call him a P38 because only half a car, right? Yeah. So Daz, he was a cracker, and on the radio station, he was always trying to get Dad to advertise, our tyre service and our automotive business. Anyway, Dad didn't believe that it ever worked, so he didn't tell the old man, but he said on radio live, if you've got a green car this afternoon, if you drive it to Russell Scaife's place at Wyong, you can get a free wheel alignment. Well, you could not believe the number of green cars that just arrived he wanted to demonstrate that this works, right? Well, he thought the funniest thing was that he just didn't tell Dad. So the old man's, all of a sudden there's all these green cars arriving at the tyre service, and the old man's going, what's going on here? And then he's been tipped off. And it's the sort of practical jokes they had all the time, and those sorts of things were sort of part of growing up. They were really, really close mates.
Do I remember you did some of those New Zealand Mobile 500, Nissan Mobile 500, whatever they were called in the mid-90s when you weren't racing in them, and you and he called them for Kiwi TV, though. We didn't get those in Australia, so there's a few VHS tapes floating around in remote June.
Yeah.
I could only imagine he would have been more fun. He would have been fun to call with.
Yeah.
More fun to hang out with for a race.
Oh, well, totally. I mean, the calling got in the way of a big weekend, right?
Yeah, damn the car race.
Yeah, exactly. He was a lot of fun to hang out with, and as you correctly point out, it wasn't it wasn't really the highlight of the weekend doing the races. It was hanging around at the bar with him. He had a big sense of adventure, young Baz.
Nicely put. So around this same point in time, the laser stuff, I wanted to talk Toyota Supra. Kind of important now that we got a GR Supra racing in Supercars. Who would have thought that we'd get to that point one day? But how does the link for you to Peter Williamson come to be, and you end up driving that Supra with him? So that's 86.
Yeah, so Dad and Willo were really, really good mates. They actually raced against each other in that Sun 7 series in Sydney. So, Willo had the Celica and Dad was in the Ford Capri, but they'd been mates for a long time, especially in the automotive industry. Willo had Toyota dealerships, and so they were good mates. Peter was always sort of looking to bring some young guys through, and so he and Dad, did a deal for me to come and drive that year with Peter, and we just supplied some tyres and stuff. It wasn't a massive sort of financial thing, but as it turned out, he had a really big crash. Only did a few laps, and he crashed at the end of Conrod Straight. And in those days, the internals of the cars weren't anywhere near as scrutinised as we currently have, and the fire extinguisher actually come loose and hit him in the face. Car was written off, so that we didn't get to start at all. But yeah, I did some driving. I principally did a fair bit of testing at Oran Park with it. I really liked it. It was for me just a massive sort of step up for what I was doing, and and it probably formed the basis for me understanding what the next step looked like in terms of what the cars felt like, and they were on cross-ply tyres then, so we hadn't gone to radials yet. There was a lot of conjecture about what was going to happen with radial tyres. I mean, I know that sounds really weird, but that's exactly what it was. They were on cross-ply Dunlops. So when radial tyres come along and all that stuff, fortunately, I got to drive for Fred at the end of that year, basically. It was September 86, I moved to Melbourne. So I was 19, and the following year I did the Nissan Gazelle series in the 2 Litre Championship. So that was a really nice foray for me to get into those sorts of cars and probably have a little bit of an apprenticeship that wasn't too wild or too difficult in terms of trying to acclimatise yourself to more powerful, more demanding cars.
Do you remember racing that Supra at the Sandown 500 in 1986? And I guess this is your first time on the grid with Brock and Moffat and Grice and Johnson and Richards, and we'll be here naming them all day. But do you remember that as a real? I mean, you've talked a bit about your first touring car championship round when you drove for the Nissan team, but because it's not part of the championship back in those days, we talk so much championship now because everything counts. Back in those days, there was all sorts of other events that weren't part of the championship per se, so they kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit. But how does that sit in your memory bank from back in the day? What sticks out? Were you overawed? Were you thrilled to be there? Was it a combination of everything?
Oh, that's a really good way of putting it. I mean, that's what it was. All of a sudden, here's a foray into the highest level racing that there was, and Peter Williamson was actually a really good driver. I mean, a lot of people didn't really, because he wasn't in the open series that much, probably didn't get to see him at his best, but he was one of the best drivers in the country at the time. So for me, just to be able to compare myself against them and then be on track, when the superstars were out there, as you point out, it's actually quite humbling. You think back about how that works, and there's little things like that. I remember very clearly then coming out of that into the Gazelle, and then in '88 in the wet at Sandown, Glenn and I were the 2 fastest. I wasn't driving those cars all the time then, but in the rain at Sandown, Glenn and I were the 2 fastest cars. Jimmy Richards was right with us, and those sorts of things, they're really symbolic because you use them as little measures, little milestones of, am I driving the things okay? What do I really compare like? And in those sorts of conditions on a wet weather day at Sandown, it's pretty low grip and pretty hard. So that was fun.
What was that car like to drive? I mean, you look back at, if you took that Supra of 1986 versus Chaz Mostert, Ryan Wood, Andre Heimgartner, whichever of the Toyota blokes now, and you park the Supra supercar next to it. I mean, they're a Supra. That's about it, though. You look in the Group A cars at the time, and the interiors, there's nothing to them. Like they're very basic cars, which when you compare to what we've had since, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, well, the most stark thing for me with that is I did a thing with Alan Heafy in a GDR just recently, last year, and when I got in, I just
like a race car.
Yeah, I just went, oh my God. Like there's no bars, I mean, torsional rigidity obviously was something that we didn't value. We didn't value that much. I know we did later, but in that time, to think about how fast that car was, for instance, and what it did in terms of just the interior safety, extraordinary. I mean, and going, I mean, when you think about it, the top speed and the areas where you're going fast at Bathurst, for instance, in a GDR, almost exactly the same as what we do now.
Yeah.
So, and with no aero, so
you don't know what you don't know.
Smaller tire.
Yeah.
So all those things. So you sort of think, what does it look like? We never even thought about it, Noonz.
No.
Just wasn't even on my radar.
No, It's funny, isn't it? It's funny, isn't it? You talked about racing in the rain before, and I think that was practice at Sandown with you and Glenn in those GDSR or HR31. What do you call it?
HR31. Yeah.
They're the same thing, but they do different names.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the English language. You have a lot of words that are the same, but are spelled differently. What is, when you fast forward down the line, when I think of wet, when I think of accidents, when I think of all that sort of stuff, we haven't talked about Eastern Creek 95 on this podcast, and you've talked about it a bit over the journey, but Is that one of those ones that is the biggest crash of your career by far, straight away? No other podium finishes? Because when you look at the aftermath of that car, what prompted me is the discussion around the interiors of cars at that time. When you look at the wreck of that Winfield car, it's at 31 years ago now, it also looks unbelievably nude. And until you have an accident like that, you don't look at certain things. But what did you learn out of that you applied for later on?
Oh, well, I mean, we were weather testing that day for Yokohama, and it obviously got the drag racing compound on turn one, and it just fired off the road at ridiculous speed, and because it fired off the road and then made the grass, there were concrete barriers that shouldn't have ever been there. I mean, circuit safety. You think about
on the grass, not way back at the concrete wall perimeter of the track. These were concrete blocks
on the grass in the runoff area,
like halfway down on the bitumen drag strip part.
Off
on the
to the
grass.
left, off in the grass.
Yeah.
So extraordinary. And I to this point, and even the doctors and everyone I saw as a specialist with it, I don't remember going off the road. So
what's the last thing you remember?
I remember turning into the corner and losing control and going to the edge of the road. But then when it made the grass, I can't remember.
But you remember everything in the lead up. You remember you hear about
turning into
crashes. They don't remember lunchtime, and that's about it. But you remember right up until
the point where I knew it was going to go in hard, and it was going fast. So it was like that was the biggest shunt I had by a mile. I was in Westmead 10 days or 2 weeks or something. I broke a couple of vertebrae and ribs and had really serious concussion and stuff. I had to get my dad to trick the neurologist with the cards. He'd put cards up with whatever number of card, and the old man would be in the background going 5, doing all these things because there's the only way I'd still be there. So that was the biggest shunt. But to your point, the interior of those cars, if you remember, they basically come straight out of Group A. So the way that we built those original supercars, so that was the start of the 1993 season, those cars were just basically the same sort of build quality.
Yeah.
They didn't have the big side intrusion in them. They didn't have big crossbars in them.
You didn't even have the wraparound seats at that stage.
No, had none of that. Well, that's actually what happened. So the seat mount was effectively a seat mounting to the floor. It tore those bolts out. So I was actually laying in the back of the car.
Oh, when they came to get you?
Yeah.
When does your memory kick back in?
Only back at the hospital.
You don't remember anything
getting out. No,
right.
No. So
so the seat breaks free?
Breaks free, and like that was the severity of the impact. Like it tore the mounts out of the floor, and I was effectively in the back. So a lot of what we learned from that, because now you're talking about this at the start of 1995.
Yeah.
So the build quality hadn't changed very much, and then if you think about what happened from that time on, the cars actually did improve. If you think the HRT cars, say for Lowndes in '96, that was a completely different build.
This is when the bars started.
That's when all the bars started going in, and a lot more work was being done on chassis rigidity, torsional rigidity. So we checked every car, and a lot of work was done just from a simple safety perspective at that stage. So a lot of the reasoning for being further back was essentially that, being further from the accident.
How did you get yourself back? I mean, obviously your dad helped a little bit, clearly, but how did you you missed the first round of the Touring Car Championship at Sandown. So this was, we should point out, this is at Eastern Creek, this is the old Winfield Triple Challenge. This was the start of the year, the drags, the bikes, the car racing. That was the last time that was held. Cigarette advertising went away at the end of that year. I think this was on a Thursday, wasn't it? It was like a private practice before the actual race meeting kicked in the next day.
Yep.
So this is late January. You're literally racing the clock to defend your crown because you're the reigning champ from 94. You can't defend it because you can't do the first round.
No.
So did you even get close to starting? I mean, or was it even an effort just to make it back for round 2?
Yeah, look, I did. I went out to Calder honestly, as soon as the car just rode over a bump, I couldn't breathe. It was so bad. There was just no way I was going to be able to start. So then post Sandown, so I was an interested observer at the first round of
Grumpy, frustrated driver is probably the translation.
I think that's a better definition.
More accurate.
Yeah, exactly. And then I come back for Tasmania. So we did go out and drive at Calder, and I had like big rib protector thing that was like a compression bandage thing that went around my waist, and did as much to try to absorb any of the forces. But once you're in the car, it's pretty good. But I qualified in the front right of the grid. It should have been pole actually at Tasmania.
There we go.
No. So it was really good. I mean, the car, I was happy that I qualified well. Bowie knocked me off just for pole, and then I ended up leading the race. At the start of that one. So it was good. Like, it was just refreshing to be back. And in some ways, I mean, people don't talk about this stuff very much, and there's lots of reasons why. But in the course of a career, you are going to have some shunts, right? That's just a fact of life. It can be mechanical failure, like it was for the GDR when I crashed at Adelaide. It can be your own silliness or out of controlness, whatever that is. But when you actually ascertain, so I just at that point, Belinda was pregnant with Mitch. There's a lot of things that you put into perspective when those things happen. So, the family changes for me. I just effectively bought my first house. Family things were happening. Big shunt like that restricted me from being able to go and win the championship again and maintain that title. There was a lot of things to contemplate, but what it does is it gives you a level of maturity, and it gives you a level of sensibility. You think about the risks. I mean, I used to, and that's one of the things I miss the most. It's actually doing something that's so wild, that's so close to having an accident. I mean, I dream about car racing every night, right? Because it's just been my life, and getting in a car and driving it to the absolute limit is nothing better, nothing like it. And you don't get that level of satisfaction if you haven't actually tasted how bad it can be. And that's why I always talk about, you hear me all the time, and I'm sure punters get cranky with me saying, that great racetracks have got consequences. You need unforgiving layouts.
But even some of the non-great ones have consequences too. They can bite you when you're not really expecting it.
Totally. And that level of unforgiving nature, it's epitomised by Bathurst, right? I mean, if you do a lap, and there were times that I would say to the guys, I would finish a lap at Bathurst, and I would say, you could give me 10 sets of tyres and I can't drive that car any faster, right? Which is exactly what your job is. And it's the thing that sets you apart.
What about the physical element? You've touched on really the mental element, and a little bit of a wake-up call to go, wow, there's actually stuff to lose here in life by that stage. Physically, what flowed on from that? Have you had any long-term repercussions from it? Are there things that you're mindful of now that you go, oh, actually that might be traced back to there? Or was it a case of back on the horse, back to car racing, things feel okay, press on?
Well, at the time, that's exactly what you do. You basically
kind of have to.
Well, you do, but you don't even want the others to know that you might be sore, right? So half
you've already beaten me to the next point.
So half the thing is that you just don't want your competition to think there's any frailty. So I was making out like everything was completely fine. It certainly wasn't. But you just got to get back on the horse and get cracking again. But to your point, so I when I rolled the GDR at Adelaide, it basically forced the roof down and compressed my spine at that point and popped the disc out between L4 and L5. So I've had that basically the whole time. And then the other vertebra injury from 95 was at T8 and T9, and those two are cracked. So they're always, for that sort of stuff, even through the end of my career, always had to be really mindful of how much force you could put on those things and try to minimise any of the stuff you did to make the seat as good as you could, for instance, was really pivotal to ensuring that you could do it with some longevity and not be too knocked around by it. But yeah, physically, the one that we probably on the barred list of talking about concussions or whatever, but even just the whiplash stuff of, if you fire in the fence at Adelaide, oh my God,
you stop quick.
The forces are massive. The noise it makes when your neck and everything's ricocheting around, they're just not nice. So yeah, when Tony's wheeling me up to the bar at the local RSL, that'll be the thing that'll be my neck injuries or my lower back stuff going.
That'll be what it is.
That'll be what it is.
Yeah. When you see, we've had that situation this year with Supercars with Coolsuits. Will Brown and Brock at Sydney, the first round, and there's been some other ongoing ones. It's not a new thing. That's been going on for a long, long time. Mm. And seeing what has happened to, say, Greg Crick, who had that issue with the 12-hour Mercedes all those years ago, that's really affected him. Were there any times in your career where the heat really got? Adelaide was hot every year, and it was, the teams did a good job of channeling the exhaust differently and other things to help with the driver cooling. There were just some guys who their body just couldn't cope. The bigger body blokes, or Stevie Johnson, tended to always be able to deal with that a lot pretty well. But were there times that you remember being pulled out of a car? God, this is nuts. Why are we doing this? This is crazy, because when you look back at some of that stuff, I worry for some of you and your colleagues who it's going to take time for that stuff to come through your trap. Yep. Where you barbecued yourself, or you've overheated, or you hit a bench, or whatever it might be. It takes time for that stuff to flesh out. Just football has got the same sort of situation. Yeah, there definitely will be legacy stuff that you just know that's going to affect you for sure. And I can feel it now. If I don't exercise and I don't sort of half keep myself right, it's harder and harder, right? So those things will at some stage, they'll snowball into issues there, no doubt. But more than a hit. So if you think about the worst ones, were always, say, Clipsal early in the season, and the physicality of a Clipsal 2.25 hour race, and the street circuit component of that, Noonz, is the bit that people don't really get, because you're taking big risks. You're driving the wheels off the thing the whole time. It's like a big long sprint race basically. And I remember from the lower back stuff. So I arguably should have won the championship in '99, but I lost all the feeling in my right leg at the end of that race on the Saturday, and ended up crashing out because I was driving the whole time with my left foot. Your right foot brake.
Right foot brake.
So you accelerate and brake foot's asleep.
Gone. It had absolutely no feeling in it. So all I was doing is I was driving for 4 or 5 laps prior to that. I said to them on the radio, I've lost all the feeling in my right leg. I'm driving it with my left foot, and clearly you're not going to be as fast. So I started to drop a bit of time. So then you're getting a bit desperate and you're trying a bit too hard. And I just overrun turn 11 at the back of the pits and fired myself in the fence. A little left-hander.
Yeah. Yep.
Little left-hander there.
And stopping, though, is not an option.
No.
You're just like, I'll find a way.
100%. Exactly. So, and I remember being so cranky with myself because I just, and as it turned out, it was the seat padding under sort of my hamstring area that basically blocked off the circulation, and we fixed it. I had a mad physio and all these seat gurus come in, and as time went by, we made it so good that I never had that drama again. But that was catastrophic. And
that was when Adelaide was worth like multiples of points.
Totally.
Versus the regular rounds, which sort of got cleaned up in the following years, that everything kind of became worth about the same. So that was one of those scenarios. Winding back, so it's amazing. So your first race in a car, obviously you did karts for a long time, was 1984. That's right?
Yep.
XU1 Tirana Sport Sedan. Amaru Park?
Mm-hmm. In the rain.
I was going to say, what do you remember of your first race?
Absolutely remember. It was clear as yesterday. So we had a drama with the car. one of the guys, when they were unloading it, didn't drive it off the trailer properly and pluck the exhaust off, so we didn't qualify. So by the time that we got it up on stands and put the exhaust back on and all that stuff, we missed the session, didn't qualify. So Dad knew Ivan Stibbard really well, and who was the guy that used to run the ARDC and ran Emery Park. And a gentleman by the name of John Ford was sort of the clerk of course. So he went to see them. I'm 17 years of age.
So he's looking for dispensation here because you haven't qualified.
Yep. And he wants to start me, so the great thing I love about this, it's about risk, right? So we are a society obsessed with mitigating risk.
Mm.
And this, for your son, in a Toyota sports sedan in a field of roughly 20 cars, I think there's 17 cars, you're prepared to start him in his first race in the rain from the back of the field at Emery Park. Like Emery Park in the rain, unbelievably wild. The water used to run off the hill, in rivers of water across the kink coming up past the control tower. Like it's a wild racetrack in the dry, right? So, but Dad's view of that was, and has always been, it's about competency. So he was confident that I could drive the car well enough to put me at the back of the field and set off, no problem. Now, my mum was contrary to that view.
I was going to say, not on board.
Exactly. There was certainly different feelings in that world. But Dad had complete faith that I could drive the car well enough to do that. So we start from the back of the field. I ran sixth with the fourth fastest lap time.
Was this on TV?
I reckon it would have been. It was an AMSCA round.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so not in 84. And yeah, I remember the race, and I remember absolutely every lap, and yep, no problem. And drove off, and the old man was high-fiving me because A, I didn't crash, and B, I'd come through the field.
Even better.
And to finish sixth from the back of the field, and again, the same things apply. Like all things in the rain, you can't see. So
particularly in the back.
Exactly. So in the end, in a sports sedan field, to do that, I mean, he didn't even think it was a risk, and that was vindicated.
Was that a Bargwana car before or after?
No, that was a Winterbottom car.
Winterbottom car, that's right.
So that was Jim Winterbottom, who had the XU1 in Sydney, Doonside. Dad and I drove down, picked it up. It was green, and we certainly changed the colour pretty quickly.
Green cars are unlucky, right?
Well, exactly. That was what the theory was. So we pulled it apart. Barry Seaton did the engine for it. Dad had a lot of componentry that was from Bob Morris's XU1s and stuff, and Dad originally raced XU1s in 1974. So 10 years on, it wasn't sort of really dissimilar. So we changed all the springs and shocks, had all our own wheels made, did all the stuff, had Barry do the engine, and that year in the sports sedan race at Oran Park, there would have been 30 cars I qualified on the front row of the grid with all the V8 blokes, and we had a lot of fun.
It's wild to think when you think about it. So that's 84.
Mm-hmm.
Within 2 and a bit years, you're lining up on the grid at the Sandown 500 from your first ever car race of any sort, not just of touring cars or anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen these days, that sort of stuff. Like it's kids are in karts for a long, long time. They go through the junior rungs of the ladder before they get to, the top tier. It's wild when you think back and compare to now.
Yeah. Look, it is, and then you sit back and you watch Kimmy out and Nelly on the weekend, and you look at what can be done at certain ages and stages, and I didn't even think of it. In fact, I thought the progression was too slow. I was massively frustrated by not being
2 years, not too long.
Long. Well, and I was frustrated by it. So I think, and that's part of being the beast when you're aspiring to do something and you want to do things well, and you've got your heart and everything's set on making a career out of the thing and pressing on. It was I remember it, really clearly, and a lot of that is an attitude thing. You've heard me say before, there's an old saying my grandfather used to say, you're much better off with young blokes to be able to go woo, woo, woo than giddy up, giddy up, giddy up. And that's certainly what sort of Dad did with me. It was mostly sort of trying to contain my enthusiasm a little bit, which is sort of something that you're probably better off to have that mechanism than the other way around.
Yeah. Jumping around a little bit because that's what I tend to do.
Mm-hmm.
I've written a lot about HRT cars over the years, a couple of books, researched them very heavily. You've driven a lot of them over your time and won in a lot of them. And there's always something new, though, that you learn or that you hear or that slips out that didn't get mentioned in previous eras or books or researches. But what can you tell me when I say Project 590? Does that spring to mind to you?
Yeah, I remember it.
It only just popped up for me recently. But this was an engine program at Clayton, Holden racing team.
Mm.
Very dominant days of HRT, but there was you never stood still. So this was an engine development program that we haven't really heard about before, but now we've heard about it, so we have to talk about it.
Yeah, well, it was in an era where worldwide this was a trend where they were basically trying to reduce the reciprocating mass, and they were doing lots of things worldwide, Formula One especially, to put all the weight, for instance, in the center of the crankshaft, and all the reciprocating mass was being reduced. So just in terms of what it did was that on the dyno, it didn't really say a different number, but it allowed the thing to accelerate faster because of that reciprocation. So we had effectively qualifying engines being done. And if you have a look at the engine that might have been in Murph's thing for the Lap of the Gods, that might have been a pretty good engine.
Might have been. Might have been. So was this a dedicated engine program? Was there involvement from TWR in?
Oh, there was a lot of discussion with what they were doing, but obviously we were doing our own thing. But there was a lot of work going on, and one of the things about cost, when you think about, we were right in that period of time when things like cost containment were being discussed, and to have qualifying engines in our cars of the day probably didn't make a lot of sense, but it made a lot of sense if you were thinking about trying to get a result.
If you were looking for an upper hand on everybody else.
Exactly.
Sure. So these were, in essence, special engines.
Mm.
This was a dedicated program to create these items to get another advantage.
Totally. Yeah. And then that was going on with lots of different things. And if you think about the phasing of all that stuff, so, when the current Supercar series was really promulgated, the 1993 version of the cars had Holden engines and Chev engines. So Larry continuing on with the Holden engine, and then over a period of time, it became the Chev engine. And then as the Chev engine and the Ford engine actually got to be, in terms of specification, much closer together, there were lots of things that were done to make the cylinder head designs and the inlet manifold. Larry actually drew up the rules. So he came up with quite a scientific way of basically limiting the amount of downstream effect you could have on an inlet manifold, for instance. There were lots of people doing lots of other things. We were one of the first at Gibson's, for instance, to have the engines on the third harmonic, which meant that for that race at 1995 at Bathurst, not only did we have all our own inlet manifolds and all that being done, but not only did we have a car that was arguably the fastest car, it was going to have one less fuel stop than everybody else in 95. So there were lots of things going on in that time. It was actually really, from an engineering perspective, it was a really interesting period of Australian touring car racing.
There was stuff happening because you could do stuff.
Everywhere. Yeah. And then the correlation, at the board, say at Tega, with, us Holden guys sitting on one side and the Ford blokes on the other side, and trying to homologate a different engine every time, or trying to homologate a different part, or trying to agree on what the right process was. And man, they were pretty volatile days. Yeah.
Fly on the wall stuff for some of those meetings.
Yeah, exactly.
Those notes would have been good out of those meetings, just quietly, I would have thought. While we're in that sort of era, we haven't, I don't think, really talked about it much, but it's been talked about generally. Bathurst 06. I was HRT PR actually at that point because the previous fellow had left and decided to go to FPV and was thus removed from the office very quickly that day at Tim Pemberton's office in Albert Park. There's been a lot said about that race, about the start. Obviously, we know how it finishes with Jack Perkins parked in the rear end of your car. On the record, for sure, 100% Mark Skaife, what the fuck happened on the grid that day? Because I've heard 1,000,001 theories about it all, but what happens from inside your car on the warm-up lap, on the build-up, to the grid, to the aftermath, from the horse's mouth?
Well, there is no story. That's where all the goons have been saying, it was in the wrong gear, or, there's some...
I've heard that. Third gear, I've heard of it. Yeah,
just ridiculous. So you got to go back a little bit because it was obviously a really pressure-filled week. It was not long after the passing of Peter Brock, and we were the red-hot favourites. We had a tribute bonnet done for the livery of the car for that race. The lead-up could not have gone better. We were fastest in every session, qualified pole position, shortest price favourites in the history of the great race. And I remember saying to Garth Tander as we drove into the track together, at 5 o'clock or whatever it was, what will the day bring today, GT? And it was one of those. So, and I think that's one of the things in life you contemplate every time that you drive in on a Sunday morning to Mount Panorama, because it can be the most rewarding, most beautiful, incredible event, and it can be the most soul destroying. Destroying is the word that got me, because that's what it's like. It can smash you. So basically my rule was in those days to not heat the rear tyres up very much. So on the outlap, you're minimising the fuel usage. You come up, you form up, get in the car, warm up lap to come back for the grid. I never, because I always wanted to have a bit of wheel spin rather than clutch slip or bog it down. And so it was, and this is absolutely factual, the clutch that we won the 2005. For 2005 when we won, it had a brand new clutch in it. They were, $12,000 a day.
Tilton?
AP
clutches, yep.
So that clutch was the clutch that was shimmed after the win at 05, put on the bench and put back in the car for the 2006 race.
Because it was Bathurst,
it was
full
brand new
tanks, brand new, good to go.
We already knew it would do it. It hardly wore in the 05 race. So it was pristine. It might as well be brand new. So we did that up to the line, did all my normal stuff. And even at Bathurst, I never used to even preload the clutch very much. I used to just leave it off the adjustment point. So red light on, first slot, brought the clutch up. And as I just brought it up, as the light went out, I went to move it, and it didn't actually wheel spin, which was quite a surprise. So I re-dipped the clutch. And
you can see in the video, it goes again. Yeah.
And then I re-dipped the clutch and went again, and then it just buzzed up with just this mad level of clutch slip. And I just reported to the guys. I said, this is a drama. On the way up the hill, it started to get a little bit better. But again, I don't know whether it would have recovered, and you would have been last, obviously. We didn't get to see what would have evolved. But it was not anything different to what I would normally do on a Bathurst start.
And no warning.
No warning.
Nothing on the warm-up lap that makes you go, it's a little bit weird.
Nothing. Not one bit.
Did you ever get to the bottom of what went wrong? Or is there anything left to look at?
The clutch was half fried when the guys looked at it. So it's a little bit like you're looking at accident damage. What caused it?
Where do you start?
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally where do you start?
Yeah.
Well, there it is.
There it is.
It's on the record. And that's where we're going to stop and pause right now on my chat with Skaife. But good news, part 2 is loaded and ready to roll. You can go and press the ignition button now wherever you're listening to this podcast. There's plenty more great stories, and you'll hear MS as he reflects on those late HRT years. It's really interesting stuff. I'll catch you there with the V8 Sleuth Podcast, powered by Parramatta Toyota.